Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are on our fantastic planet. And welcome to the final stream of 2024. A huge thank you to everyone who's taken part in these streams so far this year. And it's our delight to bring to you the final, kind of sad in a way, the final stream of 2024. But fear not, we'll be back in January with some more action-packed stuff and content, and I'm going to share some more with you on that. Again, a huge thank you to everyone for joining the stream today. We wanted to focus this final stream around top 5 tips for 2025. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This is a multi-platform stream, so this is going out on YouTube and Facebook and a few other places, but primarily our focus is on for the audience on LinkedIn. So again, massive welcome. Whatever chat function you have access to, then please feel free to share a question. As we get through the session, we'll share I guess some more insights into some of those questions. If we can't answer all the questions live because we've run out of time, then we'll of course endeavour to do so following the stream. Now, for those of you who may have sort of seen the blurb in the run up to this live stream, this is a big one. This is the it's the December Bonanza giveaway. So we're actually going to give away a number of licenses to our World Class Manager program and also for the book, the World Class Manager book. So we're excited to share some of those winners live on the stream in a few moments. But again, just a massive thank you for being here. If you've never joined one of the streams before, these are super practical, hyper practical. The focus of these is to try and get as much of our research, insight, best practice, knowledge, tools, data across as possible. We spend much of our time during much of the week engaging with lots of different organizations all around the world, and what we like to do is to try and share as much as we possibly can. So my name is Wayne Clark. I founded the World Class Manager organization, World Class Manager team. We've also got a number of members of the team on the line, and we've got a group of people that work with us all around the world, focusing on building line management capability across governments, across different organizations, NGOs, third sector organizations, and many teams and individuals too. So if this is the first time you've interacted with us, a massive welcome. And again, we're very, very, very excited to share with you much of what we wanted to cover as part of this live stream today. Now, there are 5 top things that we wanted to focus on. We wanted to get ahead of the game for 2025. So we've got our top 5 tips. And this session, because we've got a very nice intro for Christmas, is called Thrive in 2025. So look at that. As the intros sort of progressed through the year, they got better. Hopefully you thought they got better anyway, if this is a number of times that you've joined the live stream. But this is the big one, Thrive in 2025. We wanted to get ahead of the game. There are 5 top things that we think are really useful for you to know as a manager. If you manage a team of people, if you want to become a better manager, if you're a leader managing a huge team of people where you've got a number of managers that essentially report to you, or you may be in charge of an organization, a CEO, a CFO, a CMO, a COO, a CHRO, there's many chiefs, there's many officers in organizations, and you've probably got a huge amount of responsibility to develop the people in the organization. Our focus is, of course, how do we get the very best out of people? We believe that a lot of that, if not most of it, is to do with the quality of the manager that we work with. As we know, we can work for, in theory, the best company on the planet, but have a manager who isn't great, and we're probably not going to enjoy our work. Conversely, we can work for, in theory, the worst company in the world, but have an excellent line manager, team leader, shift supervisor, and work can be somewhat enjoyable. Again, if you think back in your career history, go all the way back. For some of us, it's longer than others, but if you think back in your career history, you probably can pick out a manager or two who you think that was it. If everyone in the world could just be like John or just be like Mary, then the world would be an absolutely great place. And we know that managers have a disproportionate impact on how it feels for all of us to come to work every day. So if this is the first time that you've met with us, seen what we're up to, seen what we do, so my name is Wayne. We run this organization called the World Class Manager Team. We've now worked with over 100,000 managers in more than 50 countries around the world. I personally had the opportunity to interact and work with more than 1,000 different CEOs. And as I often describe, a sort of 1,000 CEOs on the spectrum, from the hyper engaged, exceptional CEOs who want to sort of hold you in a loving caress all day and tell you you're amazing, all the way through to the other side of the scale, what you sort of describe as the clinical psychopath, maybe, or sociopath, or extreme narcissist. But we've seen both sides of the scale, and there's a lot to learn from everyone, right? So we're very inclusive here in the World Class Manager team. You can be awesome, you could be not that awesome, but we believe there is still something to learn. And what we've become addicted to is figuring out what great looks like in organizations, what great managers do, what great leaders do, and trying to package it and make it super simple so that everyone can benefit from it. So one of the organizations I worked in where I was promoted to manager, I got sort of promoted over the weekend and spend the weekend trying to figure out, what do I do to prepare myself for being a manager? And that was a big area of focus for us in building our world-class manager program to say, what could you give, in a way, been given access to in like 24 hours that would prepare you for the challenge of being a manager? Most of those 1,000 CEOs that we come into contact with would tell me that in their journey, being a middle manager in the organization was probably their most difficult moment in terms of their entire career journey as well. So we recognize that the role of being a manager, because there is a tremendous amount of expectation placed on the manager by the senior team. Nearly every single leadership team member that we meet with will tell us that they've got an expectation of the managers. It's the managers. The managers need to do things differently. The managers need to improve communications. The managers need to drive sales. The managers need to drive customer experience improvement, and on and on and on. And then we've got, from the manager's point of view, we've got the members of our teams who all want something from us. It's a very difficult place to be. We've not even yet got into thinking about our own workloads and our own stresses outside of work. So we recognize the role of the manager. It's probably never been more in a pressurized situation in all organizations, whether they're public sector, private sector, NGOs, whatever. Managers are certainly under pressure all the time, and that pressure never seems to cease or let up. So this is, in a way, I wanted to sort of think about this in two very different lenses. It might be that you're thinking about this from the organizational point of view. You may manage a team or an organization, and you're thinking about what we're talking about today. How does that apply? How might that apply to the organization? And I think this is going to be valuable if you're looking at it from that lens. You also might be looking at it from a very personal lens, which is how do you get better as a manager? You've got a small number of people in your team. You may be a manager for the first time, or you may not even yet be a manager, in which case, why would you do it? It's an insane thing to do. We're just joking, of course. It's a gift, it's an honour, absolute honour, that the organisation in a way enables people to be in this very responsible position of being a manager. And if you run an organisation and have grown an organisation, you'll certainly understand that the role of the manager becomes hyper important in the delivery of anything that the organisation wants. Customer service delivery, product improvement, employee engagement, shareholder returns, stakeholder engagement, everything that we probably want as the outcome of an effective organisation is heavily dictated by the quality of the managers in the organisation. So if you've been selected as a manager, I think this is a huge congratulations, because the organisation has obviously placed a lot of faith in you. The challenge is most organisations we come across, good, bad or indifferent, don't often think about the preparation that's needed for the challenge of being a very modern, very challenged people manager in 2024, 2025, because everything changes all the time. And what we focus on, and what this whole live stream is about, is to try and give you as much as we can with our insights and data to prepare you for the challenge of being a manager, or indeed to improve and up your management game. We can always get better, all of us. We've not come across anyone yet who can't get better. Well, we've analysed, I would say, probably in excess of about 4,000 different organisations during my time of doing this type of work. I began in the accountancy world, spent about 10 years in accountancy firms, spent 5 years managing a business which produces employee engagement data and results, and in the last 12 or so years with our organisation, with the World Class Manager team, and we work all around the world. So we've got this tremendous oversight of what great organisations do, and what we're going to try and do is package this into 5 very short, important tips for the purpose of this live stream. Now, as I said at the beginning, this is the final stream of 2024, so it's a little sad, but a little exciting too, because we've got some awesome giveaways. We've got the book called How to Become a World-Class Manager. Funnily enough, it's titled about being a world-class manager. This was published in 2023 by Kogan Page, who we're delighted to work with as a publisher. They recognise the value of our data and our research, and we've published this now in many different parts of the world. It's actually also just been republished in Arabic. So I was in Egypt 3 weeks ago, and we were launching the sort of very first sort of display version of the book in Arabic in Egypt. It's actually also been launched in Saudi Arabia, and it will be launched across a number of the Gulf states over the coming months. So we're very excited about that for 2025 as well. So let's get cracking. Oh, the other thing is we've also got some licenses to our World Class Manager program. So I think at some point during the stream, we're going to get into sharing some of the winners. So I'll notify the team who we've got on the line, and then we'll sort of display, I would imagine, with the magic of live stream technology, who's won these licenses. So first thing, there are 5 things actually, as I said, in the run up to this. We've called this 5 tips for 2025. So let's get into it. So the 5 areas that I wanted to focus on. Number one is thinking about strategy. Number two is thinking about communications. Number three is thinking about growth. Number four, about customers. And number five, about vision. So I'll explain what we mean by all of these as we go through. And what I also wanted to do is to share with you some of the data that we've got from our research. So we've now got data on around about 16,000 managers represented in a huge range of organizations from Vietnam to Brazil to Morocco and everywhere in between. So it's truly global data. And I think it's quite insightful because it shares with you in a way, or at least shows us what the kind of norm looks like. I'm sometimes skeptical and dubious of benchmarks. However, I think that this is quite useful data because it at least enables us individually to start to think, how might we compare to what we're seeing and what we're finding out from some of these insights and some of this data as well. So first area, when we talk about strategy, this for us is really important. Now, we're not talking about being some sort of McKinsey, strategic house of designing organizational strategy. We're accepting that the organization should have, or hopefully at least has some guise of a strategy. Our challenge, of course, as a manager is how do we make that as meaningful as possible? And the reason why I wanted to focus on these particular 5 tips is because if you want to really up your management game, if you want to be seen as someone more strategically valuable by the organization, then I think these 5 things are really important. Plus, they are what I would call binary things. What you can test for very easily on these 5 is whether they exist or not. And again, this would stand you in great stead in order to improve and sharpen your management skills, be seen by more senior stakeholders as more valuable for the organization too. And if you are in a CEO position, often it can be that these things you kind of know are important to focus on, but you don't often have the time to do it. So, again, what we're sharing here probably won't be a revelation. You're not going to sit there and say, oh, wow, the universal everything of knowing of all has just been revealed to me on this 2024 live stream with the World Class Manager team. Although we hope that might be a part of it. But the truth is that these are probably things that in your heart of hearts you should do. Challenge is, of course, we run into that ever-present problem, which is lack of time, attention challenge, all of the modern things that we deal with in our working worlds and working lives. So first area we're going to talk about is strategy. And the challenge here is not about designing an organizational strategy. I think it's actually in a way more complicated than that, which is the execution of the strategy. In order to execute the strategy, we've got to align as many people as possible with the strategy. In order to align as many people as possible, we've got to help them to understand it like the senior people in the organization understand it. Sounds like a bit of a riddle, but it's not. So my experience from this was looking at, and I like to ask real dumb questions, right? Why is it that most senior people of most organizations tend to be more excited about the organizational strategy than other leaders we meet in the organization? And not just leaders, other managers and frontline employees. They tend to be more excited about their strategy, not because they're smarter, not because they've got higher IQ. Sorry if you're a CEO and believe that you do have higher IQ. The chances are you probably don't. It's not to do with that. It's to do with the fact that most senior teams spend much more time than the average team of actually thinking through and discussing what the strategy means for the organization, what it means for their senior team, and what it probably means for them. There's an implicit individual link. There's an implicit emotional connection to a strategic statement or vision statement. And usually because the people who run the organization were the very people who designed the organizational strategy. Things that you create, you generally think are pretty good because you spent time thinking it through and you also understand it. So the other luxury that most leadership teams get is they get to spend the best part of often, in many cases, 2 or 3 days in a nice hotel with nice food, nice coffee, some nice discussions, and they emerge after a couple of days with a very complete and quite shared consensus about what the strategy means for the organization. Makes sense to them. Then what they try and do is articulate it through this horrible thing, which they often think exists, which is called a cascade. I don't know how many times you've been in meetings. I've certainly been in many of them where people will say, oh, let's cascade this through the organization. Everyone nods like it makes sense, because in theory it kind of does, but in truth, it's absolute rubbish. A cascade never worked and it probably never will work. Information doesn't magically find its way through the organization. The Christmas fairy of communications does not sprinkle this dust on people through the organization and help everyone to get it. This just doesn't work. What we know we need to do is probably replicate the exact environment or experience that the leadership team had for why they understood the strategy in the way that they did. And if you think about it, super simple. Most leadership team members get the chance to talk it through. As a sort of your average person in the organization, I might be a shop floor worker in a factory. It would be weird, wouldn't it, that I would sort of happen upon a colleague of mine and say, hey, Bob, fancy having a discussion over a sandwich about the strategic goals of the organisation and what it might mean for the team? I suspect Bob might say, no thank you, Wayne. I would not enjoy such a debate with you this afternoon. It's a weird conversation to have with a random member of the organisation, but it's the exact conversation that most leadership team members spend lots of time having. So this in a way gives us our very clear, very simple answer. The stat on the screen, the 46%, is that 46% of every manager that we've surveyed in our process do not understand the organisation's finances. Now, again, you may argue, so what? Is it important that managers do understand the finances of the organisation? We would argue it probably is, for a few key reasons, which we probably don't have time to go into on the live stream, but let's take one as an example. Let's take the pay discussion or the pay rise or not discussion that managers often are forced into a very difficult conversation with the team. I interviewed the CEO and the CFO of this business a few years ago on stage. I'm not an interviewer, I run a company, but I often get asked to do these sorts of things. I thought, fair enough, I'll do it. As I got onto the stage to interview the CEO and the CFO said to me, Wayne, look, ask me any question you want. I don't want you to look like some stooge of the company. So I said, fine. They share the organizational stats in terms of the profit number. I get carried away because the audience gets carried away. They start clapping. There's 300 managers. I start clapping too. And as I'm clapping, I'm thinking, hold on. I've been to some of their contact centers and they've told me that people are going to get a 1% pay rise. So I'm sort of there with my phone, I'm like, I'm no genius, but I can divide the number of people in the organization by the amount of money you've made. And in theory, it should be much more than the 1% pay rise people have been told they're going to get. So the guy's like, what are you doing? I said, well, you said to ask anything. He's like, not that, idiot. But he did a good job, to be fair. And he explained, X million has gone into product development, X million has gone into IT infrastructure investment, so on, so on, so on. So the profit was explained away quite clearly. And the story that he shared with me took about 15 seconds to explain. The challenge is that we've got 300 managers in the audience. The marketing or the comms team, whoever, have done an exceptional job of producing this brochure with bar charts and pie charts in there explaining all the numbers. And as I said to the managers, with all the will in the world, I've been at the conference for 2 days, I've got 300 emails. I'm not going to go and sit with the team and go through this stuff. What I can do though is share that 15-second story that the CFO shared. And the 15-second story is really powerful because it means the big difference between people feeling like we've been in a way taken advantage of or not. Which means is when you see this huge number, people often do very irrational mathematics. They divide this headline number by the number of people in the organization and say, well, someone's benefited from this for sure, and it's not me, it's not us. The managers are then forced into a very difficult position because I have to go back to the team and I say to the team, it's 1% pay rise. When I say to the team, it's 1% pay rise, a member of my team doesn't sit there and say, hold on a minute, Wayne, you're looking a little too glum at this 1%. Have you considered that we've probably made strategic investments for the future growth and sustainability of the organization? I say, no, you're absolutely right, team. Therefore, we should feel warm and fuzzy about this 1%. Of course not. When you hear it's the 1% pay rise and you've seen this headline figure of growth and this profit number, your conclusion is that we got taken advantage of. Someone's benefited and it certainly isn't us. And the challenge for the manager is we're often pushing managers into these impossible positions to have conversations with the team armed with no data, no info, no context. And it's always there. The context is always there. When the CFO explained to me and explained to the audience and me as an outsider, I sat and listened to that and I thought, you know what, 1% actually feels really fair. It was evident that all the money was needed to be reinvested in the company and they'd carved out 1% to try and make sure that people at least got something. So when it comes to articulating the finances, again, long story, but I think this is important because it's important people understand the numbers. You'd be shocked at, most organizations, I was with a company yesterday, only 32% of their managers understand the finances of the organization. And again, you could argue, so what? But when it comes to important information like pay rises and why we take the decisions we make, I think having a basic level of understanding is really important. So the key here, the how-to, when we look at strategy, is let's help as many people as possible to understand it. The challenge for us as a manager, and I think this in a way should push us into a challenging position, or challenge position, is that we've got to make sure that we understand the strategy well enough. And what does that mean? Well, that probably means having better conversations with senior stakeholders. That means, in a way, if I could set a challenge, if you're new to management, or if you're thinking of becoming a manager or planning to be a manager and lead a team, here's the challenge. Try and understand your organizational strategy well enough that you could debate your CEO or your CFO or your CMO on the strategy of the organization. It's a good benchmark test, right? Because The key is, of course, as a manager, if you want to be seen as more valuable, understanding the strategy is never going to be seen as a bad thing. And the degree to which you can understand the strategy will help you to do all sorts of smart stuff in terms of your career journey as well. So first one is looking at strategy. Second big one is looking at what we call communications. Now, when we look at comms, we understand that it's the most subjective thing that we ever come across in the organisation. There isn't an organisation out there who says to us that we don't want to improve communications. All organisations want to improve communications. The best organisation we've ever found, analysing 4,000 different companies, and it had the highest employee engagement score that we'd ever seen in an organisation, to the point where it's like looking at a cult as an organisation, exceptional scores. Even that organisation said that they wanted to improve communications. Communications is tremendously subjective, if not totally subjective. What you believe is improved communications, I might believe is different, and we're both correct. So the challenge here, 3 real simple questions. Let's ask the team, what do you want to know about? How often? How best can I get that information to you? What do you want to know about? How often? How can I get that information to you? Don't worry, the recording will be available online afterwards on YouTube and on LinkedIn and whatever else. So you can see all of this stuff in here. What we found is 61% of managers say that they understand the communication preferences of their team, which is quite interesting. 4 out of 10 managers do not understand the communication preferences of the team. And even the 6 out of 10 who say that they do they really? I mean, this is a self-reporting figure. Let's assume, of course, that everyone's been very straightforward and truthful, and that they do genuinely understand. I suspect it might not be as high as 61%. So understanding the communication preferences is really the answer. We've got to figure out what feels like improved communication for individual members of the team. If you then deliver on what they believe is improved communication or would be, and then ask them the question, do you think that communications is improving? What are people going to say? They're going to say absolutely yes. Why? Because my selfish conditions for improved communications have now been met. So it's very, very personal, very subjective. And again, as a manager, we can deliver on that. Point 3 is looking at what we call personal growth or growth. Actually, you can more look at this from the individual level, and you can actually look at it, of course, from the organizational level. Probably don't have time to go into that side of it. Let's focus on the people side of this. When we look at growth, we know that about 50% of people will leave the organization because they don't feel grown and developed. When we found this stat, and we've sort of corroborated this in other parts of like research and looked at data on this, also in part of the book, we focus on this too. This seems to be pretty much standardized. So about 50% of people who leave cite career growth and development as the number 1 reason why they left. So you know this adage, people leave managers, not companies, which I think is broadly right. But why do they leave managers? It's not because we've just got horrible managers out there. There's a few horrible managers and a few horrible bosses. But in the most part, it's not that. It's that I feel that there aren't enough development opportunities here. Now, one of the things I do also as part of what we do in our work, I lecture. So at Bayes Business School, which is part of City University here in London, I lecture maybe 4 or 5 times a year with undergraduates and master's students, focused largely on looking at management development and personal growth challenges to do with the workplace and some of our research. And one of the really big areas that we look at is we describe, and I like to describe to undergraduates about what I call the dream manager. Not the dreamy manager, the dream manager. I talk about the dream manager because there are 2 key aspects of what we consider to be a dream manager. One is that they would understand you really well. They understand your hopes, your dreams, your ambitions. Sounds easy, doesn't it? I just sort of reel it off like it's an easy thing for people to do. And based on your experience, there are certain people who are very adept at having these types of conversations. It's more of an art form than a science, absolutely. There's another part to this, which is to what extent is this manager well networked across the organization? And I say this for an important reason, because we've come across charities, NGOs, well, not just charities and NGOs who don't have money, but lots of organizations can be challenged budget-wise. They may have no money whatsoever to be able to invest in people's growth and development. Doesn't mean that there aren't growth and development opportunities. And I think this is a huge misnomer. So what we look at is these 2 areas. Let's hope that we've got a manager who is genuinely interested in your growth and development. If I'm your manager, us sitting on a regular basis and me finding out what your background's like, what your parents might have wanted for you, where you want to go in life, why you want to achieve those things, what maybe your grandparents did. Understanding you totally, understanding your friends and family, what they think, all of that stuff's really important to get a holistic understanding of understanding who you are and where you might want to go. Now, let's assume that I'm good at doing that. Another thing is really good is that I'm well networked across the organization, because now I can start to be a little bit entrepreneurial and say, right, actually, Kathy in accounts, has got some stuff that I think you'd really find useful. Or I spoke to Marcus down on production, and actually Marcus has got something that you could really benefit from, because now I understand where you want to go and I understand opportunities that might exist in the organization. Either one of those being present is interesting but not useful. You need both of these things to be present, which is why we often talk to undergraduates about when you're going for an interview, and this is what I'd maybe I've lost people jobs thinking about this, maybe this is like a bad thing to do, but I sort of talk to them about 2 red flags. As an undergrad, 2 red flags. If you suspect that this individual is genuinely not interested in your growth and development in your future, like red flag, bad. And also, if you suspect that this individual is really poorly networked across the organization, bad, stay away from that manager. They could care deeply about you but not be able to offer up opportunities for development, and vice versa. Again, you probably don't want either one of those situations. You want both of those conditions in a way to be present. So when we look at personal growth, this is about being entrepreneurial. It's not always about money. Interestingly, we've got large banks that we've worked with that have got, hundreds of millions to invest in learning and development programs and complex OD programs. But actually they've got lousy scores when it comes to personal growth. We've got charitable organisations with no money, not like a little bit, like zero, nothing. And they've got exceptional scores on personal growth and how people feel about development opportunities. So I think this is a huge one. The key, of course, for us as a manager, like the how-to, is to understand this individual as much as we possibly can. Not to pry, because there are certain things that people might not want to share with us, but understanding the individual and understanding what might happen across the organisation is really important. Interestingly, one of the areas, and it kind of happens like, I can show you like a magician, right? You can go into an organization and I can sort of write this on a piece of paper and then I can put it in my pocket and I say, I'm getting a feeling, guys, I'm getting a sense that you've got an organizational issue here. And they're like, oh, really, Wayne, what is it? And you sort of put this piece of paper and you say silos. I'm just getting a sense that you've got a silo working problem. They say, wow, you're like a genius. How did you know? So it's just a hunch, because every organization's got the same problems. When we look at the silo issue in most organizations, we're quite stovepiped in how we work. We don't often interact with many people outside of our world. If you put a sort of employee or manager cam on someone's head and followed them for a week in the life of most people at work, most people don't interact with many people outside of their immediate world. So finding a well-networked manager might be a challenge. But again, I think this is a huge opportunity for us as we thrive in 25 to think about how can we build our network. Of course, there are platforms to do that with the public like LinkedIn, but internally in organizations and across key stakeholders, how can you 10x? There's another challenge. How can you 10x your network for 2025? Absolutely possible to do it, and would stand you in awesome stead for the future as well. Number 4 is looking at what we think about when we describe, in a way, delivery for the people we serve. Now, when we talk about the customer, this is, of course, like the raw word of customer we're using. We all serve someone. Chairmen serve a board. The board serve investors. Investors serve other investors who probably serve a sovereign wealth fund who serve someone else, right? There is always someone to serve, and we've all got people and key stakeholders that we've probably got to deliver for, or the other way around. We've got key stakeholders who've probably got a vested interest in us being successful because they benefit from the outcome of whatever we might do. So when we think about this, we all serve someone. The key question that we like to look at is how well do we understand what those someones actually need from us? And that changes all the time. I guarantee that you as an individual are a different type of person than you probably were if I met you on the 12th of December 2023. And you're a different person than you probably were on the 12th of December 2022. We change all the time, just like organizations, just like customers' preferences. Challenge is for most organizations, they're not very good actually at understanding what's changed. They're very good at collecting data. Now, lots of big organizations we work with are awash with big data, with insights, with phenomenal stuff. The challenge though, of course, is for the manager. How do I distill all of that stuff and make that meaningful in my world? And lots of organizations aren't very good at helping managers to do that, which herein lies, I think, another opportunity for us as managers. Can we become exceptional at understanding what our customers want? Last year I was in the Middle East with another bank, and I had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people about what the customer said. I went online and looked at one of their public forums, and they've got millions of reviews of their customer experience, which isn't great. I asked the people in the audience, how many people of you have actually taken time to look through and read and understand what the public say about you? 0, not one person in the room. And it would have been a good opportunity for one of them to put their hands up, because the most senior person who was there from the bank looking after customer experience was also present. So even if you hadn't looked at it, you'd probably thought to yourself, this is a smart idea, just put it on my hand, no one's going to check. But no one did. Awash with data, awash with insight, no one's looking at it. And again, the challenge for most of us as managers, we don't probably know what's changing in the customer's world. The opportunity, of course, is that if we can really get ahead of this, you start to find yourself in an advantaged position. It's hard to get a competitive advantage if we talk about that, either as a manager or as an organization. Understanding the customer feedback and understanding what people need from us is probably a really smart way to do it, and therefore it gets us all sorts of exciting leverage and, of course, insight, and ultimately helps us to deliver better for the people we're designed to deliver for. It's a win-win, win-win-win. So 4 or 5 wins. So final one is looking at what we call, in a way, vision. You could interchange this with leadership. The key thing that we're talking about here is how excited do people feel about where the organization's going next. I think this is a really key one for 2025, depending on where you are in the world. Again, we work across lots of different countries around the world. So depending on where you are, actually, maybe there's a roll call. Shout out where you are, which country you're in, what city you're in, let us know. That'd be great. But we work, with all different people from all different organisations in lots of different countries. The challenge for many people, we talk, certainly in the UK, there's a lot of conversation right now and has been about the cost of living crisis. It's the same thing I found in Egypt. It's the same thing I found in Morocco. It's the same thing I found in Brazil. It's exactly the same thing I found in Hong Kong. All of us talk about the same challenge, which is inflation in most places in the world is challenging. We're in a difficult position. And business is, in a way, there's a lot of uncertainty. What we want to do is build a sense of hope, not false hope, that we're going to try and be this sort of walk into the organisation and high-five each other. But the truth is that we want to have some sense of excitement and hope about what's going to happen in the future. And one of the things that we look at here is how do we, as managers, distill what the organisational vision is, mission, all that sort of stuff, which is kind of interesting. But it's interesting at the organisational level. It doesn't mean that much to people. Jane Vivi is live on the line. She's in Valencia. Certainly better than you can't see out the window, but this is grey London. Hello to Jane. And one of the things that we want to try and do is give people a sense of hope and excitement about where we're going next. And think about this for a moment. We're at Thursday at the moment, for most of us in the world, we're on Thursday. If someone gave you 2 tickets to go to the most amazing place in the world that you want to go and spend time, like Jane's got in Valencia, on Saturday, with the person that you want to spend the most time with in the world, your life between now and Saturday would get better immediately. You feel better in the present when you've got something exciting to look forward to. And here is, in a way, such a very simple psychological measure, I think, of looking at a great organisational vision or team vision as well. Does it excite you in the present? It's one of the things that we look at quite a lot. One of the things that we often talk with CEOs about, and this is probably where I get into my most difficult conversations with people, is to say, talk to me about what the future looks like. And some of the organisational visions and future descriptions are so unbelievably boring. By the time they finish explaining it, I'm asleep, they look half asleep, no one in the organisation's excited. And again, what we can't do often as a manager, depending on how senior you are, is you might have limited ability to influence what that looks like at the organisational level. But we can certainly do something quite exciting at the team level. And one of the questions that we like you to think about is, what do you want to be famous for? What do you want the team to be famous for? This is like a revelation conversation to have with many people, because it enables you to start to unpick and understand the level of ambition that people might have in the team. Asking someone what they want to be famous for, or what we want to be famous for, is really important. We're a small organisation. We work agile, in a very agile way. We work globally. Our focus is on making a massive impact. We're a small team that makes a massive impact, working with governments, working with large NGOs and large corporations around the world. Unheard of in a way for the size of organisation we are, but this is something very key. Want to be famous for making a massive impact and filling the world with awesome managers, right? Very easy to articulate. And it requires a little bit of thought. What is it that we want to be famous for? So again, I would challenge you to think about for 2025. Let's think about what that might mean for the organisation. Let's think about what it might mean for the team, but importantly, for you as an individual, which I think is a great place to start. What is it that you want to be famous for in 2025? If it's come to you like a revelation right now, feel free to share that live on the stream. Otherwise, you can share it on LinkedIn with us after. So I think this brings us to a special time in the live stream. We're sort of 36, 35 minutes in, and this brings us to the important moment of revealing. We've got some very lucky winners. So one of the things that I wanted to do, and I do this periodically if you follow us on social media stuff, is that we like to give people access to the World Class Manager Program. This is a 24 modular program that equips you with everything that in theory you need to know about being an awesome manager. So let's in a moment reveal who the winners are. Wow, there we are. Look at that with the power of technology. We've got some winners. We've got Lona, we've got Lorna Smith, we've got Desiree Lewis, Sophie Ann Goodhine, we've got Laura Whitworth. I won't read out all of the names, but a massive congratulations if you are named here. Of course, we will email you to let you know in terms of the if you've got access to the World Class Manager Programme. And I think what we'll probably do, maybe I'll check in with Rose in the team, but we'll probably organise a date so that we can kick this off together early in January to make sure that you definitely do thrive in 2025. So it brings us to the end of the live stream. If you've got any questions, please feel free to jump in, shout out some questions, thoughts. It might be something on one of those 5 areas that you think, you know what, this is something that we're doing really effectively, it works really well, or it indeed might be something that you feel is a challenge and you want to sort of put this to us. I'll do my best job possible to read and answer this live. And for those of you who do ask a question, we of course have got a copy of the World Class Manager book, and I'm sure we'll make sure I get this signed because it might be worth a fortune in the future. It's about 10 quid right now, you never know. So a question from Lucy. Hi Wayne, thanks for your advice. Thank you very much, Lucy. Particularly revision and strategy. I'm a relatively new manager building a team for the first time. What advice would you give to make a coherent brand from a set of unique and skilled individuals? Oh, what a great question. Well, I think there's two parts to my answer here. Partly it's about trying to define a shared vision for the team. And that's a great idea because it means that you can include everybody to be able to start to contribute towards designing that theme and that vision for the team. If you think about the way that it works, if you were the ultimate leadership team, Lisa, of the organisation, and let's assume you've got, let's say 10 people, arbitrary number in the team, you would make sure that you involved every one of those 10 leadership team members in the discussion about being able to articulate what the organisational vision is. I think this is exactly the same for the team. You'd probably want to organise a conversation, and you might not need to do that all together. Depends on if you've got a remote team. If you do, then you can obviously take input from each individual, put together some sort of summary feedback of what you think everyone said, and then put that to the team and then get their sign off. But I think it's really important to be able to get an agreed vision for what it is that the team focuses on, which is why I think having something like a way into that of asking what do we want to be famous for could be a great way to do it. The other reason why this is so important is just like you said, you've got unique, skilled individuals. What you want to make sure is that each individual has an opportunity to shine and to be able to utilize their skills adequately. One of the challenges for many organizations is, and not just organizations, also teams, we employ people because they bring to the organization this amazing tapestry of knowledge and experience. We hire them when we say, actually, you know what, most of that I actually don't need. I need you to do like 20% of what you're great at. I need you to do that for like 40 to 50 hours a week until we tell you otherwise. And this is what breeds a huge sense of frustration. I've got this amazing myriad of skills and experiences that aren't being able to be utilized in the team. And there was a saying which I heard, which I absolutely love. And it says 90% of your time should be spent improving what you do, because that's your day job, and 10% of your time should be doing something new. Is there an opportunity to be able to carve out 10% of people's time? And it might not be possible, Lucy, in December or January because you're really busy, but it might be possible starting from March or April. That half a day a week could be spent doing something which is different to the day job, but related in some way to either achieving the team vision or indeed the organisational vision as well. So I hope that answers your question, but I think this is a great question, and I think those are two areas where certainly they're hyper practical because you can make a huge impact on those. A question from Alex Fenner. It's been many years since I've seen Alex Fenner. I know Alex Fenner. Hi, Alex. Our company is going through some large changes at the moment, and I want to try and provide as much psychological safety as I can for my team. Any tips? Well, the obvious tip, of course, in psychological safety is making sure that people feel safe to be able to voice their opinions, to be able to, in some cases, depends on how difficult things might be, whistleblowing is like one extreme end of this, but having an opportunity to share how they feel on a regular basis is important. And I think key to that is making sure that people feel informed. One of the things we found, Alex, we found it in two different organizations, and I was always interested in how you do this. These were companies who had pay cuts, so they were in a very difficult financial position, and they had a higher employee engagement score following a pay cut. And I always wondered, how do you do that? How do you take money away from people in a moment of turbulence and change and have them feel happier? That feels impossible. And I sort of did some investigation to find out what they did. One was in the telecoms business, one was a large membership organization. And both organizations told me the exact same story of how they did it, which was this over-the-top exceptional communication. On a weekly basis, there was a briefing with the team. Even when there wasn't anything to communicate, there was a briefing to talk about the fact that there wasn't anything to communicate, and they fielded questions. The important thing about this is psychologically, you feel much more in control when you feel like you know what's going on. Most human brains don't cope very well with ambiguity, and sort of, everything gets a bit difficult when we don't know what's going on psychologically. So I think that's an important element of this is being on the front foot as much as possible, not just for you as a manager, but probably most senior managers and leaders across the organization, and therefore making sure that we're as clear as possible about what's going on. The other side of this, of course, is that we're able to understand and anticipate some of the challenges and some of the frustrations and some of the fears of the individuals, which can only come, of course, from deeper conversations with those individuals and making sure that we do understand what their fears, challenges, frustrations and concerns might be. So a great question from Alex. A book will be on its way to you. And I guess this is going to be final question because I guess with the time, final question from Jane Laborie. Thank you very much, Jane. I'm trying to convince our CEO to share more info. Great question. He's reticent as he feels it's distracting and folks don't need to know what other teams are working on. Any persuasive arguments I can use to change his mind? Well, I don't know. Obviously, we've never met Jane. I don't know what sector, what type of organization that you work within. But here's a stat. Here's a headline. And this is one that may be useful for him, depending on how he sees the world. We looked at 37 companies that have got exceptional engagement scores. And what we did is we tracked their return on investment over a 5-year investment period. So the headline was this: if you invested £100 in these companies over a 5-year investment cycle, the £100 after 5 years would have been worth about £120. So not bad. Obviously, you've probably beat inflation, but not the greatest investment in the world. If you invested the same £100 in the 37 companies that we knew had high levels of employee engagement, then the same £100 would have returned you £452 over the same time period. And we did this analysis with a company that's got like decades of experience in stock market analysis. So excellent data and great analysis. £100 return 120 or £100 return 450. Which one would you prefer? Probably the 450. I'm sure he would prefer to get the 450 one. Now, why was that the case? Two things, which I think are important again for the rationale for this. One is that we found that these organizations had exceptional management scores. There was something about the quality of management, which is why we zero in on the role of the manager so much, because we know that great management dictates everything when it comes to looking at the quality of performance of the organization. The second one, heavily related to your question, was about the quality of communications. And if you think about this, right, I did some work a number of years ago with a sports sort of psychologist guy. It's fascinating. And he was talking about, because at the time I was trying to prepare myself to run, I've only ever run one marathon. That will be it, I think, for me. But as I was preparing to run the marathon and do some training, he was asking me about what dialogue is happening in my mind. So he said, when you go out for a run, what are you saying to yourself? And I'm saying to myself, this is insane. Why would you do such a thing? This is horrific. I'm going to die. All of this sort of totally irrational thought has happened as I'm trying to run these longer distances, longer than I'd ever ran before. And he was saying, notice what's going on for you, because this is all about the power of your internal dialogue. And one of the connections that we made was looking at the parallel between what a high performance athlete might think about, which obviously I'm not, and how they talk to themselves versus what actually happens within inside an organization. You can scale the whole thing up, and it's quite fascinating when you look at this. The quality of communication, i.e. the speed of transmission of information, and how fast people can know something new will give you your ultimate competitive advantage as an organization. I don't care what type of organization you're in, you can only ever, as an organization, differentiate yourself really on two very different variables or two axes. One is what you do, one is how you do it. The what you do, unless you've got some unbelievable technology that's not being able to be replicated or something that's like truly remarkable, then everything that you do as an organization can be copied probably by someone else, right? And we've seen that time and time again. What you can differentiate yourself on though is how you do it. And the how you do it is about culture. You improve the culture and the quality of the organization's culture by speeding up the throughput of knowledge and information through an organization, which means that your company becomes hyper agile. So when you face these economic shocks and difficult situations, your company is able to move and change. Hopefully, because I've been standing on my soapbox with this answer, I've convinced your CEO to share more information. Send him my way if he still doesn't believe, and we can put him straight. So again, thank you so much for being part of these series of live streams for 2024. We're very excited because at the beginning of 2000, this was March 2024, when we set out with an ambition to create these live streams. I think the first one that I did had 19 people register for the live stream, and we set a goal that by the end of 2024, we would have our first live stream where we get 1,000 people register. The live stream, which is going to happen in January, where we've got an exceptional special guest, the CEO of one of the largest accountancy firms in the world, is going to be sharing with us his lessons, I guess, in terms of how he's achieved this exceptional career. We have 950 people registered for this live stream. So I suspect by the end of the week or early next week, we'll have our 1,000 target. And this is in a way like a little final story of setting a stretch goal. And that first live stream, when I had 19 people register, and I think I had 6 people actually show up, and I set the goal of 1,000, it felt so irrational, so ridiculous. How would we ever achieve that? Totally impossible. And here we are at the end of the year with staring at close to 1,000 people registering for our January live streams. So everything to play for in 2025. Let's thrive in 25. 5 top things that we focused on. It's a huge pleasure to be engaged with you through this process. And if you've attended one or more of these, thank you so much for your time. To know we're so fundamentally busy, and we look forward very, very much to sharing more with you in 2025. Have an awesome Christmas and see you soon.